I was once invited to a private dinner, and I want to paint this picture for you because the setting matters. It was a small gathering, perhaps 12 people around a table, and every single person in that room had built something remarkable with their life. Entrepreneurs, investors, philanthropists, people who had started with very little and created extraordinary abundance. And I remember sitting there quietly observing the way monks tend to do, and I noticed something. These people were not what I expected. They were not loud. They were not flashy. They were not constantly talking about their achievements or their possessions or their net worth. In fact, the most successful person in that room, a man who had built multiple businesses across 3 continents, was the quietest person at the table. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions more than he gave answers. And at one point during the evening, someone asked him directly, "What is the secret? What is the one thing that separates people who build wealth from people who do not?" And he was quiet for a long moment. And then he said something I have been thinking about ever since. He said, "It is never the big things. Everyone is looking for the big secret, the big break, the big strategy. But it is always the small things, the things nobody sees, the things that happen in private, in the early hours, in the quiet decisions that nobody is watching. It is the hidden things." And today, that is exactly what I want to talk to you about. The hidden habits of millionaires, not the obvious ones. Not the ones on every listicle and every YouTube thumbnail. The real ones, the deep ones, the ones that are hiding in plain sight and yet most people completely miss. But before we begin, I need to say something that I believe with absolute conviction, and I need you to hear it in the spirit in which it is intended. This conversation is not about money for the sake of money. It is not about the glorification of wealth or the suggestion that the accumulation of material resources is the highest human aspiration. The scriptures are very clear. Artha, which means wealth and material prosperity, is one of the 4 legitimate goals of human life. It is not the only one, and it is not the highest one, but it is a legitimate one. And the reason I want to talk about the habits that create abundance is not because I want you to worship money. It is because I have observed again and again that financial stress, the inability to provide for yourself and your family, the constant anxiety of not having enough, the feeling of being trapped by circumstances, is one of the greatest obstacles to human flourishing. When you are worried about money every single day, it is very difficult to be generous. It is very difficult to be present. It is very difficult to grow spiritually. It is very difficult to contribute meaningfully to the world. So building financial abundance is not a distraction from a meaningful life. Done rightly, with the right values and the right intentions, it is an enabler of one. So let us begin. And let us begin with the first hidden habit, which is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all. The first hidden habit of millionaires is that they think differently about time. And I do not mean they use time management apps or follow the Pomodoro technique. I mean something far more fundamental. I mean they have a completely different relationship with time at a philosophical level. Most people think about time the way they think about money they are spending. Each hour passes and is gone. They are living in what I would call the transaction model of time, exchanging hours for immediate outcomes. But the people who build extraordinary wealth think about time the way the wisest investors think about money, as something to be invested, not spent. Every hour they commit to learning a skill, building a relationship, developing a system, or creating something of value. They are not spending that hour, they are investing it. And they expect a return. Maybe not immediately, maybe not for months or years, but they know that time invested in the right things compounds just as surely and powerfully as money invested in the right assets. This is why you will find that most genuinely wealthy people are voracious, almost obsessive learners. Not because someone told them to read, but because they understand intuitively that knowledge is leverage, that an insight gained from a book today might save them from a catastrophically expensive mistake tomorrow, that a skill developed over months might open doors that no amount of money could buy. Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors who has ever lived, is said to spend 5 to 6 hours every single day reading. Not emails, not news feeds, books, annual reports, letters, deep, substantive reading that builds genuine understanding. And when people ask him about this, he says something remarkable. He says that knowledge builds up like compound interest. Every book you read makes the next book more meaningful because you have more context, more connections, more frameworks to hang the new information on. The hidden habit is not just reading. It is treating every hour of learning as an investment with a compounding return. The second hidden habit is one that I find deeply aligned with the spiritual principles I have spent my life studying, and that is the habit of delayed gratification, taken to its highest and most disciplined form. Now, everyone has heard of delayed gratification. Everyone knows the famous marshmallow experiment, where children who could wait for a second marshmallow went on to have better life outcomes. But what I have observed in genuinely wealthy people goes far beyond the ability to wait for a reward. It is a complete reorientation of their relationship with pleasure and discomfort. Most people move away from discomfort and toward comfort. This is the default human setting. It is wired into our biology. Conserve energy, avoid pain, seek pleasure. But the people who build extraordinary wealth have done something remarkable. They have inverted this. They have trained themselves through years of practice to become comfortable with discomfort, to actually feel something that resembles satisfaction when they do the difficult thing, to feel something that resembles discomfort when they take the easy road. The entrepreneur who wakes up at 5 in the morning, not because she has to, but because she has come to associate those quiet early hours with progress and possibility. The investor who holds his position through a terrifying market downturn, not because he is not afraid, but because he has trained himself to respond to fear with analysis rather than reaction. The business builder who reinvests her profits back into the business month after month, living below her means even as her means grow, because she understands that the compounding of reinvestment will create something far more extraordinary than the immediate pleasure of spending. This is delayed gratification, not as a strategy but as a way of being, a deeply embodied, almost instinctive preference for the long game over the short one. The third hidden habit is one that very few people talk about in the context of wealth creation. And that is the habit of radical self-awareness about money stories. Every single human being on this planet carries within them a set of deeply embedded beliefs about money. Beliefs that were formed in childhood through observation and experience, and the things that were said and unsaid in the homes we grew up in. Beliefs like, money is the root of all evil. Rich people are greedy. We are not the kind of family that has money. Money does not grow on trees. It is selfish to want more than you need. You have to work yourself into the ground to earn a decent living. These beliefs are not neutral. They are not harmless background noise. They are active, powerful, determinative forces that shape every financial decision you make, often without you even knowing it. People sabotage their own success not because they are not capable, but because somewhere deep in their subconscious, there is a belief that tells them they do not deserve it. or that having it would make them a bad person, or that it would not last anyway, so why try? The hidden habit of millionaires is that they have done the work. Often deep, sometimes painful, always illuminating work, of examining these stories, of holding them up to the light and asking, is this actually true? Where did this belief come from? Is it serving me or limiting me? And then deliberately, intentionally, replacing the limiting story with a more expansive and accurate one. Not with affirmations pasted on the bathroom mirror, with evidence, with small actions that prove the new story true, with a growing body of experience that says, actually, I am someone who manages money well. Actually, wealth is not incompatible with integrity. Actually, I can create value for others and be abundantly compensated for it. This inner work is invisible. Nobody sees it. But it is foundational because you will never outperform your own self-image in the long run. The outer world of your finances will always eventually mirror the inner world of your beliefs about money. The fourth hidden habit is what I would call the obsession with value creation. And this is something that struck me very powerfully when I started paying attention to how genuinely wealthy people think about their work. They are almost never asking, how can I make more money? They are always asking, how can I create more value? These sound similar, but they are profoundly different questions. The person asking how to make more money is focused on extraction, on how to get more out of the system. The person asking how to create more value is focused on contribution, on how to give more to the system. And here is the beautiful, almost spiritual paradox. The more genuinely, deeply, abundantly focused you are on creating value for others, the more money flows toward you as a natural consequence. Because money at its core is a measure of value exchanged. It is the universe's way of saying, what you offered was worth this much to this many people. The millionaire who built a business did not build it by thinking about profit margins first. She built it by obsessing over a problem, a real problem that real people had, and becoming more committed than anyone else to solving it better than it had ever been solved before. The profit was the consequence of the value, not the other way around. And this is why I always say, if you want to know how financially abundant your future will be, do not look at your income statements. Look at your service statements. How many people are you genuinely serving? How deeply are you solving their problems? How much value are you actually creating in the world? Because the answers to those questions will tell you everything about your financial future that any bank balance ever could. The fifth hidden habit is one that the most successful people practice so naturally that they barely even register it as a habit. And that is the habit of protecting their primary relationships. Now you might be wondering what relationships have to do with wealth. And the answer is everything. Absolutely everything. The research on this is so consistent and so overwhelming that I am genuinely puzzled that it does not feature more prominently in every conversation about success. But study after study, biography after biography, conversation after conversation, with people who have built something extraordinary, the pattern is undeniable. The people who sustain long-term success and abundance are invariably the people with deep, stable, nourishing relationships at the core of their lives. A partner who believes in them, a small circle of trusted friends who tell them the truth, a mentor or teacher whose wisdom they can draw on, a community that grounds them, and equally, the people who build something impressive and then lose it, the people whose success is brilliant but brief, the people who arrive at the summit and find it empty. These people almost always have a story of relational neglect somewhere in their history. The marriage that was deprioritized for the business, the friendships that were allowed to wither, the children who grew up with an absent parent who was always just one more deal away from having enough time. Your relationships are not a distraction from your success. They are the infrastructure of it. They are what makes success sustainable, meaningful, and worth having. The sixth hidden habit is the habit of making decisions from abundance rather than from scarcity. And this one is subtle, but it is so important. Most people, regardless of how much money they have, make their financial decisions from a place of fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of losing what they have, fear of missing out, fear of making the wrong choice. And decisions made from fear are almost always suboptimal. They are reactive rather than strategic. They are short-term rather than long-term. They are driven by the desire to avoid loss rather than the desire to create opportunity. Wealthy people have trained themselves, again, not effortlessly, but through deliberate practice, to make decisions from a fundamentally different emotional state. A state of abundance, a state of trust in their own judgment, a state of patience and discernment rather than urgency and anxiety. This does not mean they are reckless. In fact, the opposite is true. They are often more careful and more thorough in their decision-making precisely because they are not making decisions under the duress of fear. They can think clearly. They can see the full picture. They can weigh options without the distorting lens of panic. And the quality of their decisions reflects that clarity. The habit is not a financial habit. It is an emotional habit, a spiritual habit even. The daily practice of returning to a state of groundedness and sufficiency from which clear and wise choices become possible. The seventh hidden habit is one that surprised me the most when I first began to notice it. And that is the habit of generosity. Now I know what some of you are thinking, that generosity is something you do after you become wealthy. First you build the abundance and then you share it. But I have found, consistently and without exception, that this sequencing is backwards. The most financially abundant people I have encountered are almost universally and almost instinctively generous, not because they can afford to be, but because generosity is part of the mindset that created the abundance in the first place. Because the generous mindset is the abundant mindset. And the abundant mindset is the one that sees opportunity where others see scarcity, that creates value rather than hoards it, that builds relationships rather than transacts with them. There is a principle in the Vedic tradition called the principle of reciprocity, the understanding that what you give out into the world returns to you multiplied. Not as a magical formula, but as the natural consequence of living generously. When you give freely, you build trust. And trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship and every successful enterprise. When you give freely, you expand your own sense of what is possible and available. You train your mind to operate from abundance rather than lack. And that training changes everything. The opportunities you notice, the risks you are willing to take, the connections you are able to make, the vision you are able to hold. The eighth hidden habit is the habit of learning from failure faster than anyone else. The most successful people are not the ones who fail the least. They are the ones who extract the most learning from each failure and apply it the fastest. They have developed what I can only describe as a metabolic relationship with failure. They process it quickly, extract the nutrients, discard the waste, and move forward lighter and wiser than before. They do not dwell in the failure. They do not perform excessive self-flagellation, but they do not avoid looking at it honestly either. They sit with it long enough to understand it completely, and then they use it as fuel. This requires a specific kind of emotional maturity. The ability to separate your identity from your results. To be able to say, this venture failed, without it meaning, I am a failure. To be able to say, this decision was wrong, without it meaning, I am wrong as a person. That separation is not easy. It requires practice. It requires a stable and compassionate relationship with yourself. But it is one of the most valuable capacities a human being can develop, because the person who can fail without being destroyed by the failure can try more things, take more intelligent risks, and ultimately create more value than the person who is so afraid of failure that they only ever attempt what is already guaranteed to succeed. The ninth hidden habit is the habit of thinking in systems rather than in events. Most people think about their finances in terms of individual events. This month's salary, this year's bonus, this investment's return, this business deal's outcome. But the wealthy think in systems. They ask, what is the process that reliably produces good financial outcomes? What are the feedback loops in my business or my investments? What are the structural habits, the automatic savings, the regular reviews, the consistent reinvestment that create abundance not through any single dramatic act, but through the quiet, reliable operation of a well-designed system? A system is a habit elevated to an architectural level. It is not just what you do, it is how you have arranged your life so that the right things happen automatically without requiring constant willpower or decision-making. The wealthy person does not decide every month whether to save money. The saving is automatic. It happens before they ever see the money. They do not decide every quarter whether to review their investments. The review is scheduled and non-negotiable. They do not decide every year whether to reinvest in their own growth. The investment in books, courses, mentors, and experiences is built into the structure of their life. The system runs the behavior, and the behavior creates the results. And the 10th and final hidden habit, and I have saved this one for last, because it is the one that underpins all the others, is the habit of maintaining a deep and unshakable connection to purpose. Every genuinely wealthy person I have ever observed or spoken with or read about has, at the foundation of their financial life, a purpose that is larger than the money itself, a reason for building that goes beyond personal gain, a vision of the impact they want to have, the problem they want to solve, the legacy they want to leave. And it is that purpose, that deep, burning, non-negotiable why, that carries them through the inevitable difficulties of the journey, that gets them up when they are knocked down, that keeps them going when the logical, rational, reasonable thing to do would be to quit. Money without purpose is just accumulation. And accumulation, the scriptures tell us, is ultimately hollow. But money in service of purpose, money as a tool for creating impact, for solving problems, for enabling the life and the contribution you are here to make, that is something extraordinary. That is the kind of abundance that satisfies just the pocket but the soul. And it is the kind of abundance that, in my experience, is both the most durable and the most deeply fulfilling. So there they are, 10 hidden habits, not the habits of overnight success or viral moments or lucky breaks, the habits of the quiet, consistent, deeply intentional building of a life of genuine abundance. They begin not in the bank account but in the mind. Not in the market, but in the morning routine. Not in the boardroom, but in the bedroom at 5 in the morning when the decision is made, again, for the 1000th time, to invest this day rather than spend it. Wealth is not a destination. It is a direction. And it is available to anyone who is willing to do the invisible, unglamorous, deeply rewarding work of building the habits that create it. Begin today. Begin small. Begin now. Because the hidden habits of millionaires are not secret. They are simply waiting for the person who is serious enough to practice them. And that person can be you.